There's been a lot of back and forth about this. I believe Starmer just called Sunak a liar, which is pretty bold.
Yeah, and he accused him of breaking the ministerial code. Look, we've got a little clip of this actually. This just goes to illustrate. I'm now calling last night's debate the £2,000 debate because that's what it feels like it is to me. Let's just get a flavour.
Do you
of
want
that.
to put everyone's taxes up by
£2,000?
£2,000 worth of higher taxes, with £2,000 tax rise.
Okay.
They've come up with this figure of £2,000.
£2,000 worth of higher taxes.
We're going to take a look at last night's debate, and we're going to really throw it forward to the BBC debate on Friday, where we see all the main parties in action. And we're going to discuss the points that worked from last night, so the good territory and the not so good territory. And we'll also look at the polling behind what we've seen as well. Joining me here in the studio, Joey D'Urso, who is a senior data journalist at The Times. He's given you a bit of an assessment. He's fact-checked all the claims made in last night's debate. And we've got Joe Twyman with us as well, director at Deltapoll, who'll be digging into the polling. Should we come to you first, Joey, if that's okay?
Sure.
Now, 4.8 million people tuned in to that leaders' debate last night. There were several claims made by each of the party leaders. And of course, we're going to hear some of these, aren't we, in every single election debate. Is it too broad for me to say what worked and what didn't? So if you were strategising for Friday, where we're going to see, well, all the main party leaders or representatives. So, for example, Angela Rayner's going to be there for Keir Starmer. What can we learn from last night?
Well, I think, the Conservatives want to hammer Labour about tax. They want this big, scary warning, the Labour Party are going to put up your taxes. They all remember the election of 1992, where that was seen as a really effective, the bogeyman that the Labour Party will put up your taxes. And they use this, frankly, misleading figure of £2,000. There's been a lot of back and forth about this. I believe Starmer just called Sunak a liar, which is pretty bold.
Yeah, and he accused him of breaking the ministerial code. Look, we've got a little clip of this actually. This just goes to illustrate. I'm now calling last night's debate the £2,000 debate because that's what it feels like it is to me. Let's just get a flavour.
Do you
of
want
that.
to put everyone's taxes up by
£2,000?
£2,000 worth of higher taxes, with £2,000 tax rise.
Okay.
They've come up with this figure of £2,000.
£2,000 worth of higher taxes.
Yeah, that wasn't all of them.
Yeah, one key thing about this £2,000 is before you even get into all the chonky assumptions that have made up this massive figure, it's £2,000 over 4 years, right? So that's actually £500 a year. And, if I tell you your taxes are going up by £2,000, you wouldn't generally think of that as being spread over 4 years. And so that's a much smaller amount. It's clear what they're doing. They just want to stick this figure on people's head. They want to, people to think of the Labour Party as the high tax party. And
it worked though, didn't it? People
we're all
are
talking about it 24 hours later, right?
Exactly.
So, maybe that's exactly what they want. As for the attacks that landed on Sunak, I noticed there was an applause in some of these pollsters looking at the various methods of approval, landing the stuff about, the super rich and the taxes seemed to play pretty well. Joe will probably be able to tell us more about that. And, you heard Starmer talking often about the record of the last 14 years. It's pretty hard for the Conservatives to make that message of change, given, how long it's been and how long they've been in power and some of the statistics that Starmer's throwing at them.
So if we stay on this issue of taxes, spending, economy, did we get any polling on that, Joe? What was the overall impression if we did?
Well, it's really difficult to think of these things in terms of polling because you have the immediate snap polls. We had one straight after the debate and we had one in the early hours of this morning. And one showed that Rishi Sunak was ahead very slightly, statistically a draw, and another showed that Keir Starmer was significantly ahead. And I have to say, I think they are largely meaningless in the broad sense because it's not about the immediate aftermath. It's about, as we've seen, the claims and counterclaims that gather momentum or indeed don't over the subsequent days. And then it's the effect that has on the polls, if at all, that determines actually whether they're an impactful event or not. Because, if you remember the last time we had an election, seems like so long ago now, with Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn going up against each other in the debates. Does anyone remember who won the debates according to the polling then?
Wasn't it evens?
It was virtually the same result. It was almost split down the middle again. Boris Johnson just edging it over to Jeremy Corbyn. Virtually the same result. Obviously, didn't help Jeremy Corbyn in the when it came to the election. And so yes, £2,000 is going to come out of this, but whether that benefits the Conservatives or whether that benefits Labour remains to be seen. To take up the point about 1992, incidentally the first election that I worked on as an analyst, the situation then was very, very different because the Conservatives were ahead when it came to the question of economic management. They are behind by some distance and for a long time in this instance. And so what they may find is they make these claims, but most people aren't listening. And those that are, a lot of them don't believe them. And so it won't help them in the ballot box at all. Similarly, Keir Starmer landed a few good blows, relatively speaking, on the idea of change, the idea of Rishi Sunak being out of touch. But again, I imagine that's pretty much priced in. I don't, of the 4.8 million people, did you say? I don't imagine many of them who watched it last night will suddenly turn around and say, "What? Rishi Sunak's rich?"
Yeah, pointing out the obvious. So in terms of Friday, the next debate, the BBC debate, is going to have the 7 main parties there. No Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. So if we're looking at taxes, do the Conservatives, I think it's Oliver Dowden, isn't it?
Penny Mordaunt.
It is Penny
Penny
Mordaunt,
Mordaunt,
forgive me.
Angela
You are
Rayner.
absolutely right, yes. Which is something I'm very much looking forward to, just to see it happen, to be quite honest with you. But does Penny Mordaunt repeat the £2,000 claim?
I'm sure she will, yeah. And also, because
Even though it's been sort of laid into today, it's been criticised today, you think they'll just keep bowling ahead with it?
I expect so. I mean,
What have they got to lose? In polling terms, they're doing very, very badly. I see this as a Hail Mary, as American sports fans would refer to it. It may very well not come off, but given that they have very little else to go on, and this at least is attracting attention, it seems to me it's a bit too simplistic to say it's a repeat of the £350 million on the side of the bus.
Brexit bus, yeah.
But there is an argument to be made.
There is a bit of that about it.
You can just throw these things out, and even if people are talking about it, it's something.
But equally so, for those people who voted Brexit and then did regret it, one of the things that they cite is always the claim on the side of the bus and how we were told we get extra money for the NHS. And of course we didn't. Joey, where do you want to go next? So something you think you might hear again on Friday, or something you didn't hear at all last night?
Well, I think a huge factor on Friday is going to be Nigel Farage, right? I mean, that is an absolute bombshell thrown into this campaign. If we're talking about what might not necessarily move the polls, but what might have a big impact on how many seats parties win on July the 4th, I think that's probably a much bigger factor than the debate last night. I mean, he'll be trying to turn it into the Farage show. He'll be trying to pull the conversation desperately towards his topics of immigration, which might be difficult for Labour and the Conservatives. Obviously, net migration has gone up massively in the last couple of years, which both major parties have said, is a bad thing, and they want to bring down, which is fertile territory for Nigel Farage. So I think he will try to dominate on those terms. I'm sure
Well, the issue, I suppose, with Nigel Farage is he's always want to dominate full stop. That's I mean on everything, right? And here's Nigel Farage, Angela Rayner, and Penny Mordaunt. That's an interesting prospect. It does make me worry whether Carla Denyer of the Greens, for example, is going to get a word in edgeways.
And that's the thing, except there's another 4 people there. And so I do wonder...
They're going to have to time limit it,
I do wonder exactly how much will go through. I completely agree with Joey. That the debate will largely be about the Nigel Farage show. But what I do think the main difference will be, other than the fact that no one will be able to get a word in edgeways, is I think Labour will push back immediately on the £2,000 claim. One of the things that I noticed yesterday was that Keir Starmer didn't really...
It took a while.
It took a while. He didn't really attack that from the beginning, instead coming back to it later and saying this isn't true, where are your numbers from? But I think from the outset, if the Conservatives do deploy, which I agree, I think they will, I imagine we'll see Angela Rayner attack that from the off. And so it may simply be Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt arguing with each other, and then Nigel Farage banging on about immigration.
Another thing that'll be interesting is seeing Labour attacked sort of from the left. You know, you've got the Greens, you've got, to varying extents, the Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru, who'll be making left-wing arguments against Labour. We know that their left flank can be pretty soft. You know, we've seen in the opinion polls, we've seen Labour falling back in some of the places they've traditionally done really well, particularly in Muslim areas in the election, the issue of Gaza. We've got all the issues of these deselections of left-wing Labour MPs. So that could be an interesting curveball in the debate.
Okay. Let's just talk about this whilst we're talking kind of polling wrapped into this. We've had this poll this afternoon, the YouGov poll, Joe, haven't we, that puts Reform UK within 2 points of the Conservatives. This poll's got a slightly new methodology behind it, so that allows for some of it. But just talk us through that.
My former colleagues at YouGov have decided to change their methodology during the election campaign.
Why?
We can
Just because they
speculate
can.
as to why that might be. Okay. But what we can conclude is that in changing their methodology, they have brought down the Labour gap. Labour lead has decreased and Reform has gone up slightly. So yes, within 2 points. Will this be a long-lasting increase? We will have to see. There will be more polling to come. Up until this point, there really hasn't been much in the way of statistically significant change compared to before the election was called. And so, will this be a turning point or simply a talking point? Well, it's too early to tell. My sense is that Reform probably will increase as a result of the week of publicity
of the
that
Farage
they've had,
effect,
and then the Farage effect, particularly on Friday.
Yeah.
But whether that lasts as we move further into the campaign remains to be seen.
Yeah.
It's worth remembering in recent elections, around about a third of people have made up their mind during the campaign. So there really is still all to play for.
Yeah, and these are important, aren't they? You know, but people might not necessarily watch them religiously, but we've seen the power of TikTok and other social media platforms. That's how a lot of people will catch last night's debate. We're actually speaking to a TikTok expert a little bit later on to talk about research based on how each party is using TikTok, and particularly what happened during last night's debate.
I think it's really worth remembering that the media landscape, particularly with regards to the social media landscape, has changed beyond recognition since 2010 with the very first televised debate. And it was the very first televised debate with Nick Clegg and Clegg Mania and everything that actually made a lasting difference to the polls. Since then, and this includes the other debates in 2010, we have not had a significant impact from debates. They always present themselves as having the potential to bring about change, which they do, but they actually never deliver on that because the public the audience has changed, the way that politicians approach it has changed, but also social media has a massive impact. And essentially, it's all about the TikTok clips, the Twitter, formerly X, formerly Twitter.
I'm still calling it Twitter.
We'll stick with that. It's all about that instead.
But you're absolutely right, because very few people actually sit down and watch linear TV now. Very, very, very few people want to invest an hour, 10 on watching a whole TV programme. That's just how it works these days.
I was just thinking, since that first debate with Nick Clegg, and I agree with Nick, there must have been 15, 20 election
with Joe
debates.
rather than Nick Clegg. Agree with Joe.
Agree with Joe, absolutely. And the only one that really sticks in my mind was the Ed Miliband, "Hell yes, I'm tough enough."
But that wasn't an interview. Was that an interview?
Was that an interview?
Yeah, and I was going to say, and similarly, Michael Gove with, I think we've had enough of experts. Those lines came from interviews rather than from debates.
Okay, 2017, 2019.
Most of the significant lines, I had this discussion with Adam Bolton yesterday, who joins us for Bolton's Back Half at 8:30 this evening, how most of the significant lines come from the one-to-one interviews. I mean, we could talk about the most recent example of Liz Truss and her Claire's accessory jewellery and clothing. We saw that during the Tory leadership debate.
Fields of wheat,
There's the Fields of Wheat and Theresa May, but that was an interview, wasn't it, rather than a debate. The Sun's Never Mind the Ballots, hosted by Harry Cole, they had a live poll tracker on the screen, and it basically, using kind of a worm, so a line, showed the impact of specific phrases and messages during this debate. Why are you laughing, Joe?
I'm not laughing, I'm smiling at supporting my polling colleagues in the industry with their innovations.
Listen, there is a point to this. Those in the media may be tired of hearing about Keir Starmer's toolmaker father, but the public seem to respond very well.
James, remarkable. So that's all of the public, not just Tories and Labour split. Toolmaker. Look at that line. We've heard it so many times. Every speech that Keir Starmer does, it's my dad's a toolmaker, dad's a toolmaker. He's doing it for a reason. The public like it, right?
The worm is on the move, Harry. It's going into
The
positive.
worm is turning.
Well, the worm is turning. This is the toolmaker surge. We've heard it, like you say, hundreds of times. But voters, they actually say, look, there's a relatability.
Relatability, it works. It works because not everyone like us has heard that Keir Starmer's father, did you know, was a toolmaker.
Yeah, it's like Sadiq Khan's father was a bus driver. These things clearly work. It reminds me of in 2015, the Tory slogan was the long-term economic plan, and anyone who followed politics at all closely was banging their head against the table 6 months before the election because of the amount of times they repeated it. But then when it came to the election campaign, and presumably lots of people walked into the booth and thought, well, the long-term economic plan is working, and